Rain hammered down on the empty highway, each drop bouncing off the cracked asphalt like tiny fists of warning. The sky was a bruised gray, clouds heavy and low, rumbling with distant thunder that shook Monique's small, sputtering car. Her hands gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened, knuckles trembling more from fear than the cold. Beside her, two little figures hunched under thin jackets, shivering. Her daughter, 7, clutched a stuffed bear whose fur was soaked and matted. Her son, barely 5, tucked himself against the seat, whispering, "Mommy, I'm cold." Monique swallowed the lump rising in her throat. She wanted to cry. She wanted to scream. But there was no energy left for that. Not tonight. Not with the kids depending on her. The car had coughed and wheezed its last breath a mile back, and she had managed to push it as far off the highway as possible. Now, the engine was silent. Smoke curled from under the hood in pale gray tendrils, mingling with the rain. The tires sank slightly in the mud at the shoulder, threatening to pull them all closer to the dark, rushing lanes. Every passing car sprayed them with water, headlights glaring like accusing eyes. I don't know what to do," Monique whispered, more to herself than anyone else. The words sounded tiny against the storm. Her mind raced. How would she get the kids home? How would she keep them safe until anyone, noticed? The thought of leaving them alone, even for a second, made her chest tighten until she could barely breathe. A loud honk pierced the air, sharp and sudden. She flinched. One of the passing drivers leaned out, shouting something she couldn't hear over the storm, his face twisted in impatience. "Move your car. What's wrong with you?" The rain washed away the words as fast as they were spoken, but the anger lingered. Monique's heart sank. No one cared. No one would stop. She hugged her children close, feeling their tiny bodies shaking against her. "It's okay. It's okay," she murmured, though she didn't believe it. Every instinct screamed at her that the world had left her behind, abandoned her in this storm. She thought about her apartment, cold and empty, bills piling up on the counter. She thought about the hours she worked at the diner and the grocery store, exhausted and unseen, trying to hold life together with hands that were constantly bleeding from trying to do too much. Her stomach growled faintly. She hadn't eaten since morning, and the kids hadn't had much either. Hunger gnawed at her as another wave of rain splashed against the windshield, drumming a relentless rhythm on the roof of the car. She pressed her forehead to the steering wheel and closed her eyes, praying anyone would come. Anyone to help. Minutes passed, or was it hours? The world outside blurred into gray rain streaks. Then she heard it, the distant growl of engines. Low, rumbling, cutting through the storm. Monique opened her eyes, squinting into the gloom. A line of motorcycles appeared, cutting through the rain like steel shadows. Her first instinct was fear. Who were these people? Were they trouble? She pulled the kids closer, tense and ready to defend them with all her strength. But the riders slowed, circling the broken car. Helmets lifted, revealing weathered faces, some scarred, some young, eyes soft beneath their rough exteriors. They dismounted, boots thudding against the wet asphalt, and one of them, a tall man with a gentle but commanding presence, approached. His leather jacket bore a patch she couldn't quite read in the rain. "You okay?" he called, voice calm but carrying over the storm. "Kid's all right." Monique blinked, unsure what to say. She had expected ridicule. She had expected judgment, but not this concern. They're fine," she stammered. I don't know what to do." "The car." She gestured helplessly to the smoking hood. The biker nodded once, as if he understood more than words could say. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll make sure you're safe. All of you." And in that instant, something in Monique loosened. A fragile thread of hope wound its way through her chest, thin but unmistakable. The storm hadn't stopped, but for the first time tonight, it felt like someone had arrived, not just to see her struggle, but to help her. She held her children close and watched the bikers begin moving around the car, their movements confident, deliberate, protective. Something she hadn't felt in a long time settled over her. Safety. A sense that maybe, just maybe, the night wasn't going to swallow them whole after all. The rain continued to pour. The road was still lonely, but she wasn't alone anymore. The rain still poured outside, but Monique's mind drifted back to days that felt heavier than storms. Each memory pressed against her chest like the asphalt pressing beneath her small car tonight. She closed her eyes and saw herself not on the highway, but in her cramped apartment, the walls thin enough that every cough, every argument, and every laugh from neighbors seeped through. It hadn't been easy to get here. She remembered the morning rush, her son tugging at her sleeve, sleepy-eyed, asking for breakfast she didn't have time to prepare. Her daughter was fussing over homework she didn't understand, her fingers ink-stained and small. Monique had kissed them both on the forehead and whispered, "Mommy's got this," though she was already running late for her first job at the diner. The diner was cold before the coffee machines even started, and she was colder still. She wiped tables, refilled drinks, and smiled through exhaustion that settled deep in her bones. The customers rarely noticed her. Some called her sweetheart, with a patronizing tone. Others didn't even look her way. Monique cleaned, cooked, served, and smiled, all without recognition, all without rest. Every tip barely stretched to cover rent, food, and gas. And yet, she pressed on. Every day, she thought about her second job, stocking shelves at the local grocery store in the late afternoon. By then, her feet ached, her back throbbed, and her hands were raw from lifting boxes and scanning groceries at lightning speed. She would see the world through fatigue-colored eyes, customers complaining about the smallest inconveniences, and the managers barking orders like she had no heart, no life outside the fluorescent lights and metal shelves. And through it all, she carried the kids. Every scraped knee, every bedtime story left untold because she had to work. Every tear she couldn't shed because it would worry them. Monique had learned to swallow pain whole, tuck it away in some hidden pocket of herself, and keep going. She remembered nights like tonight, when the city felt like it was swallowing her whole. She had walked home with groceries in one hand, the other holding her daughter's small, cold hand. Rain soaked through her jacket. Cars splashed by without a care. She had prayed, quietly, desperately, for a sign, for anything to remind her that she was not invisible. Sometimes a neighbor would nod, a friendly smile at the corner store, or a kind word from a stranger. But more often than not, the city passed her by, like a river that never noticed the stones it flowed over. Bills piled on the counter, each one a tiny reminder that survival was a daily battle. Electricity threatened to cut out. The landlord's calls were growing more frequent, and every knock on the door brought anxiety. Sometimes, she had to choose between paying for gas to get to work or buying milk for her kids. And she always chose the children, even if it meant walking miles to save a few dollars. There had been nights when the power went out and she had sat in the dark, hugging the kids close, pretending the world wasn't collapsing around them. They would shiver, and she would press them against her, whispering nonsense lullabies she barely remembered, trying to make them feel safe in a world that often felt anything but. She had cried silently then, tears soaked into the sleeves of her jacket, feeling small and unworthy but unable to let them see. Because their safety depended on her strength, and she had learned that strength came from pretending she had none. Her mind flicked to the mornings she left early, dragging herself from the thin mattress she shared with her daughter. Her son would still be asleep, curled in a ball, and she would watch him a moment longer than she should, memorizing the curve of his tiny hand and the way his hair fell across his forehead. She had learned the art of surviving on little sleep, on instant coffee, and on the fragments of hope she could find in laughter and hugs. And yet, despite the exhaustion, the fear, and the constant pressure, Monique had dreams. Small ones, fragile like glass. Maybe a brighter apartment, a job that didn't crush her spirit, a chance for her kids to grow up knowing their mother believed in them more than the world ever would. Sometimes she allowed herself to imagine weekends in the park, warm meals at a table that wasn't chipped and cracked, and birthdays celebrated without worry. These dreams were dangerous, she knew, so easy to break. But they were also necessary. Without them, the weight of every day would have been unbearable. She remembered moments of humiliation, too. Moments when people saw her as less than human. A store clerk telling her she wasn't in line right, a driver cutting her off and yelling racial slurs. An eviction notice slipped under her door, the ink smudged from her tears. Her entire life, it seemed, was a series of small betrayals stacked on top of one another. And yet, she moved forward, every single time. And still, she found moments of quiet magic. Her daughter's laughter in the living room, the way her son's small fingers curled around hers when they walked to school, the sound of the rain on the roof when the city slept. These moments reminded her why she kept going, why she couldn't give up. Even when the world was cold, even when everyone else seemed to turn away, she had the two little hearts depending on her. And that was enough. Her breath caught in her chest as she remembered tonight, how the storm had trapped them, how her car had died in the middle of nowhere, how hope had been so thin she could barely hold on to it. The thought of her children shivering, frightened, and alone in the dark made her chest tighten. And yet, somewhere deep in that tightening, a spark remained. The same spark that had carried her through every impossible day, every sleepless night, every insult and dismissal. Because Monique was not just a mother. She was a fighter, a protector, a woman who had faced a world that often forgot her name, yet continued to move forward, step by step, day by day. And even now, stranded on the side of a rain-soaked highway, she refused to let despair win. Her eyes flicked to the road ahead, to the shadows moving in the rain. Engines growled faintly in the distance. A sense of curiosity, of fragile hope, stirred within her. Maybe tonight wasn't just another impossible night. Maybe someone, or some people, had finally noticed, and for the first time in hours, she dared to hope. The storm had no mercy, yet over the distant hum of rain and wind, Monique heard something else. A low, guttural rumble that cut through the patter of the downpour. At first, she thought it was thunder, but then the sound shifted, steady, rolling, and purposeful. Her eyes darted to the horizon, rain streaking down the windshield, and she saw them. A line of motorcycles slicing through the sheets of rain like shadows made of steel and leather. Her heart stuttered. The bikes were massive, their tires cutting through puddles with a spray of water that shimmered in the gray gloom. Helmets glinted under flashes of lightning. Engines growled in unison, a mechanical orchestra that both terrified and mesmerized her. Monique hugged her children closer. Her daughter whimpered into her jacket. Her son's small hand gripped hers tightly. "Mommy, who are they?" I don't know," she whispered. Fear curled in her chest like a living thing. They looked dangerous. She had seen bikers before in movies and on TV. Men and women with tattoos and leather jackets. Rough edges that scratched at the imagination. But these weren't coming for a show. They were coming for her. And her heart thudded. Not entirely with fear, but with something unfamiliar. Curiosity. The bike slowed, forming a semicircle around her broken-down car. The riders dismounted in unison, boots hitting the wet asphalt with heavy thuds. Rain poured over their shoulders and ran down the seams of their jackets, but they didn't flinch. Their faces emerged from their helmets, revealing lines of age, scars from years lived hard, and eyes that held an unexpected softness. One of them, taller than the rest, stepped forward. His presence commanded attention without a single word. Rain-slicked hair clung to his forehead. A patch on his leather jacket read something Monique couldn't decipher in the dim light. He surveyed the scene, her small, smoking car, the shivering children, and the fear etched across her face. "You okay?" he called, voice deep and calm, carrying over the storm. Not threatening, not demanding, just concerned. "Kid's all right." Monique blinked, taken aback. Concern? From bikers? She had expected mockery, dismissal, maybe even danger. But not this. Her throat tightened. "They're cold. I don't know what to do," she stammered. Her voice broke under the weight of exhaustion and relief. The biker nodded, crouching slightly to meet the children's wide, fearful eyes. "It isn't right for those babies to be out here in the rain," he said softly. His tone had a weight to it. No sarcasm, no judgment, just human understanding. The kids glanced at him, and for the first time that night, Monique noticed something in their faces. Awe. Tentative awe, like a fragile flower daring to bloom in a storm. Another biker stepped forward, holding a large waterproof tarp. "We'll get you out of the rain," she said, her voice gentle but firm. She spread the tarp over the car, shielding them from the downpour. The sound of rain hitting the plastic roof felt softer somehow, less threatening. Monique blinked back tears, unable to speak. She wasn't used to this, the sudden, unearned kindness. A third biker handed her a blanket, thick and warm, damp from the storm, but comforting nonetheless. "Wrap the kids up," he said. "They'll be fine now. Don't worry about a thing." Her chest tightened as the reality of the moment sank in. These people, strangers to her, had appeared in the middle of a storm she thought she would never survive. They hadn't judged her for being stranded. They hadn't questioned why she was out there, alone with the kids. They just cared. Monique glanced at the group, noticing the little details she might have missed before. The way one biker gently patted the shoulder of another, like reassurance. The way they moved with silent coordination, communicating without words, a well-oiled machine tempered with humanity. Their tough exteriors, tattoos, scars, leather, didn't hide the truth. These were people who had hearts big enough to notice someone in need, even in the middle of a storm that swallowed most attention. Her daughter tugged at her sleeve, eyes wide. "Mom, are they nice?" Monique smiled weakly through tears. "Yes, yes, sweetie. They are very nice." The tallest biker stepped closer, examining the car. "Looks like she isn't going anywhere tonight," he said. "Don't worry. We'll take care of it. Kids first." He signaled to another, and a flurry of action began. Some bikers opened their saddlebags, pulling out rain jackets, blankets, and small packages of food. Others moved around the car, checking the tires and engine with practiced efficiency, though no one spoke loudly. Every motion was deliberate, protective, and reassuring. Monique watched, heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in months, hope. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to breathe. Her children huddled close, their small bodies slowly warming under the layers of protection these strangers provided. The rain was still relentless, but it no longer seemed like an enemy. Somehow, in this strange, impossible moment, it felt like it could be endured. The leader of the bikers finally looked up at her, helmet now removed, hair plastered to his forehead. "Name's Big T," he said simply. "We don't know you, and you don't know us. But we got you safe. All of you." Monique felt tears slip down her cheeks. The raw exhaustion of the day, the week, and the lifetime melted into a tremble of gratitude. She wanted to speak, to say something worthy of this, but words failed her. Instead, she wrapped her arms tighter around the kids, letting them feel the warmth and safety radiating from these strangers. The storm continued, relentless, but Monique felt something inside her shift. Maybe this night, this impossible, terrifying night, wasn't meant to crush her. Maybe it was meant to remind her, and her children, that kindness existed, even in the harshest of places, even in the most unexpected forms. And as the bikers worked around her, moving with quiet confidence and quiet heart, she dared to believe that help could come from anywhere, even from those whose exteriors seemed built to intimidate, even from people she would never have expected to step in her life and change it forever. For the first time that night, she whispered, not to anyone in particular, "Thank you." The rain continued to lash down, relentless, drumming against the asphalt like a drumroll of fate. Monique's car sat on the roadside, hissing smoke, while her children huddled beneath blankets and jackets offered by the bikers. For a moment, the world seemed manageable, a fragile bubble of warmth and protection amidst the storm. But life, it seemed, had not finished testing her. The first antagonist arrived in the form of the tow truck. Its yellow lights blinked in the downpour, casting jagged shadows across the soaked highway. The truck itself looked like it belonged in a commercial, pristine, polished, and indifferent to the desperate people it was about to meet. Monique's heart leapt. Relief surged. Help had arrived, until the driver stepped out. He was a tall man, young but with a hardness in his eyes that made Monique's chest tighten immediately. He looked at her, then at the kids, and scoffed. "You want a tow?" he asked, voice sharp, dripping with impatience. "Money up front. Cash. No exceptions." Monique swallowed. She dug through her wallet, counting bills with shaking hands. There weren't enough. Her throat tightened as she realized the futility of it all. I don't have that much," she stammered. "Please, I just need—" The driver cut her off, waving her away. "Then you wait. I don't have time for excuses." He didn't care that her car was smoking, that the rain soaked her children, or that fear had made her body shake. He didn't see her struggle. He only saw his rules. "Excuse me," Big T said, stepping forward, rain dripping from his leather jacket. His voice was calm and low but carried the weight of authority. "She doesn't have the money. You'll help her anyway, or you're done here." The driver laughed, a cruel bark that rolled over the wet road. "And what? Are you going to make me?" He gestured vaguely at the bikers, clearly trying to intimidate. "You don't scare me." Monique's pulse pounded. Fear surged, mixing with anger. She had already felt invisible for months, years, even. And now here was someone flaunting power over her life, showing zero empathy, zero humanity. She opened her mouth, wanting to plead and to reason, but words failed her. Another antagonist emerged, a passing car, dark and aggressive, barreling down the lane. The driver leaned out the window, shouting slurs, words dripping with malice. "Get your broke-ass car out of the way. In **********. The sound of the words cut through the storm like knives. Monique flinched, hugging her children close. Her daughter buried her face in her mother's chest, sobbing quietly. Big T's eyes darkened. He took a step forward, muscles tense beneath the leather. "That's enough," he said, his voice low, deliberate, and unyielding. The car slowed, the driver gaping at the bikers, suddenly uncertain. There was a pause, a suspended moment in the rain, before the driver sped off, leaving the threat behind, but leaving Monique shaking from the brush with malice. Even as that danger passed, the storm wasn't done. Another antagonist arrived in the form of the local authorities, 2 officers in a patrol car that slid slightly on the wet asphalt before stopping. Their eyes flicked over the scene, indifferent. "Ma'am," one said, "you're going to have to move your vehicle. This is a highway, not a parking lot." "I can't," Monique said, voice breaking. "My car broke down. Please, my kids." The officer's expression didn't change. "Call a tow service. We don't provide free rides. Move along as soon as possible." Monique's hands trembled. The storm seemed to press closer, heavier, suffocating. She felt trapped, a single mother facing a world that refused to bend for her. She wanted to cry, to scream, to collapse, but she couldn't. She had to be strong for the children. The bikers, sensing the injustice, moved as one. One reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a flashlight, shining it directly into the officer's eyes, not to blind, but to demand attention. Another rested a hand lightly on Monique's shoulder. Big T's voice cut through the tension like a knife wrapped in velvet. She's stranded. The kids are cold. You're here to enforce rules. But where's the compassion? Where's the humanity? His gaze met theirs, unflinching. You gonna turn your backs on them? On a mother and her children? The officers shifted uncomfortably. The storm, the biker's presence, the undeniable moral weight of the moment. It all pressed down on them. The younger officer muttered something under his breath and adjusted his hat, avoiding direct eye contact. Monique watched, heart in her throat. She had never seen anyone challenge authority like this. Not with malice, not with anger, but with something heavier, something truer, unwavering moral certainty. Even the tow truck driver had a moment of hesitation. Big T's presence and the other bikers standing firm, their eyes soft but unyielding, made him reconsider his tone. He started, but then cut off, swallowing the words. He motioned toward the car. Fine, I'll tow it. No charge for now. Monique's chest tightened, tears pricking her eyes. Relief mixed with exhaustion and gratitude in a way that made her feel almost dizzy. She wanted to speak, to express what she felt, but the words tangled in her throat. Her children looked up at the bikers, eyes wide, faces wet with rain and tears alike. The bikers didn't gloat, didn't revel in their moral victory. They simply moved, steady and deliberate, pushing the car slightly to the side, making room for the tow truck, and shielding the children from the worst of the rain with jackets and blankets. They offered food and sips of water. They moved as though every action was part of a silent promise. We protect those who can't protect themselves. As the antagonists receded, drivers sped off, authorities muttered, and the tow truck reluctantly agreed. Monique felt the weight of the world lift just enough for a breath. The storm outside hadn't lessened, but inside her, a warmth began to creep through. These bikers, strangers with rough exteriors, tattoos, scars, and intimidating leather, had faced down the injustice of the world for her. Her daughter's small hand found hers again. Mommy, they're helping us, she whispered. Monique pressed her forehead to her daughter's, feeling the tiny heartbeat against her own. Yes, they are, she said, voice choked but steady. In that moment, Monique realized something profound. Help often came from the most unexpected places. Courage didn't always wear a uniform. Kindness didn't always come in neat packages. Sometimes, it came roaring down the highway, a group of bikers riding through the storm, unafraid to stand up to a world that refused to notice a struggling mother. The antagonists had tried to break the night, to crush her spirit with rules, cruelty, and indifference. But they had failed. The bikers had shown her something that money, authority, and polite strangers never could. That someone, somewhere, would see her struggle and refuse to let her face it alone. Monique hugged her children closer, allowing herself to feel the tiniest sliver of hope. The storm was still raging, the night was far from over, but for the first time in what felt like forever, she believed that someone had her back. And somewhere deep inside, a quiet, stubborn spark began to grow, a spark that would carry her forward, even through the darkest hours. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle, yet the air was thick with the remnants of the storm, cold, wet, and heavy. Monique's car sat slightly off the highway, steam still curling from the hood, but the fear that had gripped her chest so tightly earlier began to ease. Around her, a circle of bikers moved with quiet purpose, as if the storm itself had no right to touch her or the children now. Big T crouched near her son, placing a warm, slightly damp jacket over his shoulders. The little boy looked up, unsure, eyes wide with a mixture of awe and tentative trust. It's okay, Big T said, his voice gentle, unhurried. You're safe now. Just stay close to Mommy. Monique swallowed hard, unable to speak. The words she wanted to say, "Thank you, I don't know how to repay you," were trapped in her throat. Her daughter, tucked under another biker's arm, sniffled and smiled faintly, her small face reflecting relief she hadn't known she could feel tonight. Monique wrapped her arms around both children, feeling their wet hair cling to her damp jacket, their tiny bodies trembling less now than minutes before. A biker with long braids, her leather jacket lined with patches of faded color, knelt and produced a small thermos. She poured hot chocolate into disposable cups, steam rising in the cold night air. The sweet scent reached Monique's nose, and for the first time tonight, her stomach loosened its tight grip on her chest. "Here," the biker said softly. "Drink. You need it." Her children's hands shook as they took the cups. The warmth seeped into them instantly, and they clung to it, lifting their faces and smiling faintly at Monique. She felt her own tears spill, unbidden, running down her cheeks and mixing with the rain still clinging to her face. It wasn't weakness. It was relief. It was the crushing weight of months of struggle lifting, even for a moment, under the kindness of strangers. Big T stood, moving to the car's hood. He inspected the engine, frowning slightly. "Looks like a fuse blew," he said, turning to another biker. "Grab the toolkit from my bike. We'll have it fixed in a few minutes." Monique wanted to speak again, to insist they didn't have to do this, that she could manage. But she caught the way the bikers moved, deliberate, confident, protective. They didn't see this as a favor. They saw it as right. And that certainty, that moral courage, filled her with a kind of awe she hadn't felt in years. The bikers worked together seamlessly. One pushed the car slightly to level on the shoulder. Another popped the hood and began examining the engine. A third handed tools, wiping hands with a rag, and offering Monique a reassuring smile. She noticed the small things, the way one biker shielded the children from the wind while another quietly reassured her with a nod. Every action, every glance spoke of care, not pity, not judgment, care. Hours, or maybe minutes. Time felt strange in the warmth of human compassion, passed as the bikers tended to the car and tended to her children. Blankets, jackets, and even spare socks were produced from saddlebags and leather pouches. Monique watched, mesmerized. These were people whom the world often misunderstood, who passed through society's shadows. Yet here they were, showing her what it meant to see another human being. Her children began to laugh softly, a sound Monique hadn't heard for days. Her son attempted to balance on the slippery asphalt, wobbling, and one of the bikers caught him mid-fall with a steadying hand. Her daughter twirled with the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, squealing when another biker twirled her back. The laughter rang out against the rain, a fragile, beautiful noise that seemed almost impossible to exist in the middle of such chaos. Monique pressed a hand over her mouth, tears streaming freely, watching the joy return to her children's faces. Big T finally straightened, wiping grease from his hands. "All done," he said simply. The engine was fixed. The car would start. "You'll get home now," he added. His eyes softened when he looked at Monique. "And you'll be okay. We got your back." Monique felt a lump in her throat, so heavy it seemed to press against her lungs. She wanted to kneel and embrace him, to convey all the gratitude that words couldn't carry. Instead, she wrapped her arms tighter around her children, allowing herself to feel the warmth radiating from the bikers without shame. Her hands shook, not from cold, but from the tidal wave of emotions: relief, gratitude, awe, and hope. One biker stepped forward and handed Monique an envelope. "Not much," he said, shrugging, "but it'll help you get home, maybe a little further." She opened it to find cash, enough for gas, maybe groceries. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time, they were tears of amazement, not despair. Monique had never expected kindness like this, never imagined it in such a raw, unfiltered form. Why are you doing this?" she asked, voice trembling. "You don't even know me." Big T shook his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe," he said softly, "but we know what it's like to struggle. We know how it feels when the world doesn't see you. And we know we can make it a little easier, for tonight at least." Her children clung to him instinctively. sensing the safety he represented. Monique watched as the bikers worked quietly, efficiently, and with dignity, never seeking praise, never demanding thanks. The storm still drummed against the asphalt, but in that small pocket of the highway, a different kind of warmth existed. Human kindness, deliberate and unyielding. Monique's mind raced, thoughts tumbling over one another. She remembered the nights alone, lying awake, wondering if anyone would ever notice, if anyone would ever care. And now, here they were, people who had risked themselves to shield her and her children, to stand against a world that had too often looked away. She felt an unfamiliar swelling of hope, fragile but insistent, take root in her chest. Her children's laughter continued, blending with the soft hum of the repaired car and the quiet chatter of the bikers. Monique breathed deeply, allowing herself to absorb every detail. The warmth of the jackets, the kindness in their eyes, and the calm determination in their movements. For the first time in what felt like forever, she let herself believe in something that wasn't fear, exhaustion, or despair. She let herself believe in protection, in compassion, and in the rare but undeniable power of people who refuse to turn away. Big T placed a hand on her shoulder one last time, firm and reassuring. "Go home safe," he said. "We'll be riding through this town for a while. If you ever need us," he trailed off, but the meaning was clear. You are not alone. Monique pressed her children close and nodded, unable to speak. Her heart was full. She had been lifted from the depths of hopelessness, carried by people who the world often misunderstood, and shown a form of love that transcended expectation, reputation, or fear. As the bikers mounted their motorcycles and revved their engines, ready to disappear into the rain-soaked night, Monique felt a deep shift within her. The terror and hopelessness of the evening had been replaced by gratitude, safety, and an unspoken understanding. Some of the most profound acts of kindness come from those who seem least likely to offer them. The storm outside hadn't stopped, but Monique's world had changed. Her children smiled, clutching the blankets and jackets, their eyes shining with the remnants of joy and newfound security. And Monique, for the first time in a long time, let herself smile too, small, tentative, but genuine. For the first time, she felt the whisper of a truth she had almost forgotten, that even in the darkest nights, there are people willing to light the way. The rain had finally begun to taper into a soft drizzle, leaving the night damp but calm. The highway, once a battlefield of fear and exhaustion, now felt almost sacred in its quiet. Monique sat in her car, engine running smoothly, the warmth from the heater washing over her children. They were quiet now, lulled by blankets, jackets, and the hot chocolate that lingered in their hands. For the first time all night, Monique had a moment to breathe, to let herself feel, not just survive. Her eyes wandered to the spot where the bikers had parked, their motorcycles lined like sentinels along the edge of the road. Big T and the others stood in the dim light, rain-soaked leather glistening, helmets tucked under arms, surveying the world around them with a careful, protective vigilance. They were about to leave, and yet their presence still carried weight, proof that kindness could exist even in the roughest shells, even in the places she had long stopped believing it could. Monique's thoughts turned inward. She had spent so many nights believing she was alone, that no one could ever understand the pressure of raising 2 children on her own. She had carried the weight of exhaustion, fear, and endless struggle for so long that she had nearly forgotten what it meant to feel truly safe, truly seen. Tonight, for the first time in memory, she had felt it, and it had changed her. Her mind wandered back through the weeks and months, the late nights at the diner, scraping together paychecks while the bills stacked higher, the silent car rides home where she had cried alone, trying not to wake the kids. The fear, the exhaustion, the constant pressure of making life work without help. It had left her hollow in some places, scared in others. She had been carrying the world on her shoulders and wondering if she could ever let it go, even for a moment. And then, they had appeared. The bikers. thunder rolling beneath steel engines, but hearts open, hands willing to help without expectation. They had stepped in without judgment, without hesitation, and without asking for anything in return. They had shielded her children from the storm, repaired her car, and offered blankets, food, and warmth. They had done what the world around her refused to do. They had seen her, truly and fully, and chosen to act. Monique felt a tear slip down her cheek as she realized the depth of what had happened. For the first time in months, or maybe years, she allowed herself to feel the weight lift, if only slightly. She let herself breathe fully, without the sharp edge of anxiety pressing against her lungs. Her children slept lightly beside her, exhausted but safe, and she realized that their safety no longer depended entirely on her strength alone. That realization was both humbling and liberating. Her thoughts lingered on Big T's words. "We got your back. All of you." Simple, steady, yet heavier than anything she had heard in months. Not a promise of money or fame, but of human decency, of solidarity. It was something she had nearly forgotten existed in the world. Something that could change a life, not through grand gestures, but through presence, care, and action. She thought of the children, their small faces illuminated by the dim dashboard light, cheeks pink from the rain and cold. She saw their eyes, wide and trusting, and felt a deep swell of love mixed with a new sense of strength. She realized that she didn't have to carry everything alone. That accepting help didn't make her weak, it made her human. And that understanding, a truth so simple yet so easily forgotten, began to weave itself in her spirit, stitching together the frayed edges of her courage. Monique's gaze shifted again to the place where the bikers had been, noticing the faint gleam of their motorcycles as they began to ride away, engines low and rhythmic. She wanted to call out, to thank them properly, to tell them what their actions had meant, but the words faltered on her lips. Instead, she let her heart speak. She pressed a hand to her chest, a silent vow. She would carry this moment forward. She would remember it when the nights were long, when exhaustion weighed heavy, when the world seemed unkind. She leaned back in her seat, letting herself finally exhale, tears still running freely. It was not just relief that filled her, it was transformation. For the first time in a long while, she felt capable of hope. Hope that extended beyond just getting through the next hour or the next day. She hoped that something good could exist in the world and that she and her children were deserving of it. The warmth from the heater spread through her, mingling with the warmth she felt in her chest. The fear and tension that had gripped her so tightly were loosening. She realized she could trust cautiously, but truly. She could accept help without shame. She could let others see her struggle and still remain strong. That was a revelation she hadn't allowed herself to embrace before. Her thoughts turned to the days ahead. There would still be struggles, bills to pay, nights when sleep would be short, and fear would creep in. But she now carried a spark, a fragile, yet unbreakable ember, of resilience born not from exhaustion, but from the unexpected kindness of others. She understood that strength was not just in surviving alone, but in rising together, leaning on others when needed, and standing tall when help arrived. Her children stirred, rubbing sleepy eyes, and she smiled softly at them. "We're okay," she whispered, more to herself than to them. "We're going to be okay." The words had weight now, grounded in experience but also in hope. She felt a new kind of courage, a courage that wasn't born from fear or necessity, but from understanding the true power of human connection. Monique allowed herself to remember her dreams again, the ones she had tucked away in corners of her mind because the world was too heavy. Maybe someday she and her children would live in a home with space to breathe. Maybe someday she could work a job that respected her. Maybe, just maybe, the small joys, birthdays celebrated without worry, weekends in the park, laughter that wasn't tinged with exhaustion, could exist for them. She realized that these dreams were no longer foolish. They were possible because she had seen what kindness could do, even in the darkest storm. She pressed a hand against the dashboard, feeling the faint vibration of the engine, and closed her eyes for a moment. The night was still, save for the dripping rain and the distant echo of engines fading away. And in that stillness, she felt a profound shift within herself. The world was not only harsh and unforgiving, it was also capable of tremendous beauty. It was capable of grace, compassion, and unexpected heroes. And she understood, deeply, that she could carry that knowledge forward. Monique leaned back, taking in the quiet of the post-storm night, letting the weight of everything she had endured sink into perspective. She felt stronger, lighter, and more capable than she had in months, years even. The bikers' intervention had not only saved her and her children from the immediate danger, they had reminded her of something vital. That hope, even fragile, was worth holding on to. And so, she sat there, her children nestled against her, feeling the warmth of the car, the comfort of blankets, and the lingering echo of kindness that had saved her night. She understood something she had almost forgotten. Survival was not just about endurance. It was about recognizing the people, the moments, and the gestures that make life meaningful. Monique allowed herself a final, steadying breath. She would rise again tomorrow, stronger, guided by the memory of this night, by the faces of those who refused to leave her in the storm, and by the realization that she was not alone, not ever. And in the quiet, she whispered to herself, with conviction, "We can make it. We will make it. And we're not alone." The rain had finally ceased, leaving the night air crisp, tinged with the scent of wet asphalt and the faint, earthy perfume of the forested roadside. Monique's car purred steadily, engine humming, a steady heartbeat beneath her hands. Her children were nestled against her, wrapped in the blankets and jackets that had been offered by strangers whose kindness had changed the course of the night. For a moment, the world felt serene, a fragile, almost miraculous peace. Monique looked into the rearview mirror and saw the faint glow of motorcycle taillights disappearing into the distance. The bikers had left as quietly as they had arrived, without expectation, without ceremony, their presence lingering like a warm, invisible shield. Monique's chest tightened. Gratitude surged through her, mingling with relief, exhaustion, and awe. Her mind replayed the night, the storm, the fear, the sense of hopelessness, and then the bikers, appearing like angels in leather, instruments of human compassion in a world too often blind to suffering. She pressed a hand to her heart, feeling the rhythm, steady and alive, echoing the truth she had almost forgotten, that courage and kindness existed in the world, often where it was least expected. Her daughter stirred, blinking up at her with wide eyes. "Mommy, are we safe now?" she whispered, her voice fragile but curious. Monique smiled through tears, brushing damp hair from her child's face. "Yes, baby," she said softly. "We're safe. We're going to be okay." Her son nestled closer, murmuring something unintelligible, and Monique responded with a gentle squeeze, pressing a kiss to his forehead. The children's breathing slowed as sleep began to claim them again, this time untroubled by fear or cold. Monique allowed herself to watch them, feeling a profound tenderness for the little lives entrusted to her care. She realized that her strength, while formidable, had been magnified tonight, not by herself alone, but by the love and action of others. The hum of the engine, the soft rustle of blankets, the quiet night, everything combined into a symphony of calm. Monique's thoughts drifted back to the bikers. Each one had played a part in this transformation, offering not just protection, but a lesson in humanity. They had shown her that kindness could be bold, that morality could be lived through action, and that compassion often demanded courage in the face of indifference or hostility. She remembered the way Big T had stood against the tow truck driver, the shouting, and the officers who had initially dismissed her. He hadn't yelled, hadn't threatened unnecessarily. He had merely held space for what was right. The other bikers had moved in harmony, distributing blankets, offering food, and repairing the car, all without fanfare or expectation of gratitude. The memory of their gentle but deliberate care left Monique feeling both humbled and inspired. She realized that the world had not been entirely cruel to her. Tonight, it had been generous in the most unexpected way. Generous with humanity, with courage, with selflessness. And though she would return to the grind tomorrow, work, bills, errands, she carried something stronger now. The certainty that there were people willing to act in the face of injustice and suffering. People whose presence could make even the darkest night feel survivable. Monique began the slow drive home, the headlights cutting through the damp night, illuminating the quiet roads she knew so well. Each turn and familiar landmark brought a sense of grounding. Her children slept peacefully, the storm no longer in their minds, no longer in their bodies. And Monique allowed herself, for the first time in a long while, to breathe freely, unburdened by the crushing weight of fear and loneliness. Her thoughts turned inward. She reflected on the strength she had cultivated over years of struggle, but she understood now that strength alone was not enough. True resilience was not merely enduring hardship. It was recognizing when to accept help, when to trust, and when to allow others to share the load. She had survived alone for so long that she had almost forgotten the beauty of connection, of solidarity, of shared humanity. Tonight had reminded her. Monique thought about her children again, their tiny hands, the softness of their voices, and the innocence that had been preserved despite the challenges they faced. She realized that the bikers had done more than fix a car or shield them from the storm. They had nurtured something fragile within her children, the understanding that the world could, sometimes, be kind, that people could stand for what was right, even when no one else would, that courage and empathy could exist outside the bounds of law or expectation. Tears slipped down her cheeks once more, but this time, they were not tears of fear or exhaustion. They were tears of clarity, of revelation. She understood that life was not solely about surviving, but about recognizing the moments and people that reminded you why survival mattered. Her children's safety, her own perseverance, and the unexpected generosity of strangers had converged into a lesson she would carry forward forever. She parked the car in front of their modest apartment building, the familiar sight grounding her in reality. The kids stirred again, half awake, rubbing their eyes. Monique helped them out of the car, the warmth of blankets still around their shoulders, and led them inside. The apartment was small, but it was theirs, and tonight it felt more like a sanctuary than it ever had before. Monique laid her children down in their beds, tucking them in carefully, kissing their foreheads, and whispering promises she intended to keep. "You are safe. You are loved, and I will always protect you." She paused, watching their chests rise and fall in the soft rhythm of sleep, and felt a quiet, unwavering resolve take root in her heart. She walked to the window, looking out at the now clear night sky. The storm had passed, leaving the world glistening and alive. Lights from distant homes reflected on the wet streets. Stars peeked through the lingering clouds, and Monique felt a profound connection to the world around her. It was vast, unpredictable, and often harsh, but tonight it had also been generous, luminous, and filled with unseen angels in the form of bikers who chose to act. Monique whispered into the night, a vow carried on the cool breeze. "I will pay this forward. I will be that light for someone else, just as they were for us." Her voice, small but firm, resonated with the weight of her experience and the clarity of her newfound purpose. She understood that the world might not always be kind, but that kindness, when it appeared, had the power to transform lives. She remembered every detail: the sound of engines, the careful movements of hands distributing blankets, the gentle smiles, and the unspoken promise in every action. And she understood that these acts were more than gestures. They were a reminder of the capacity for goodness that existed in every person, waiting to be awakened by opportunity or need. Monique sat in quiet reflection for a long while, letting the night wash over her, letting the lessons sink deep. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. Life would continue to test her, challenge her, and demand her resilience. But she carried within her something stronger than fear, stronger than exhaustion. The memory of courage, compassion, and selfless love embodied by people she had once feared and now revered. And in the quiet, she allowed herself to smile, fully, without reservation. She was a mother, yes, but she was also a survivor, a witness to humanity at its finest. And she understood, more clearly than ever, that the world's cruelty could never extinguish the flame of kindness, nor could it diminish the human spirit when it had been touched by genuine compassion. Monique rose from the window, moving to the small living room. She pulled out a notebook and began to write, words flowing in a rush. She wrote about the storm, the fear, and the exhaustion, but also about the bikers, their courage, their kindness, and their unwavering moral compass. She wrote about her children, their laughter, their innocence, and the promise she would keep, to remember this night, to carry its lessons, and to reflect its light in her own life. Hours passed. Dawn began to creep into the sky, painting the world in soft shades of gold and pink. Monique paused, looking out at the awakening city. She saw people rushing, cars starting, and life moving forward. And she understood that the storm, both literal and metaphorical, had passed. She felt lighter, freer, and transformed. Her children stirred, waking to the soft glow of morning light. Monique gathered them close, feeling their warmth, their small hearts beating in rhythm with her own. She whispered again, softly but firmly, a promise etched into her soul. We are not alone. We are never alone. And we will rise, together, every time. The memory of the bikers, their faces, their hands, and their voices would remain with her forever, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and moral action. She understood now that true heroism was not always loud or grand. It could be quiet, steadfast, and deeply human. And she resolved to honor that lesson in every choice, every action, and every moment of her life. Monique held her children close, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with blankets or jackets. It was the warmth of hope, the light of kindness, and the resilience of the human spirit. And in that moment, she understood the truth that would guide her for the rest of her days. That even in the darkest storms, there are people who will stand for you. There is light, there is love, and it can change everything. And with that, Monique, a mother, a survivor, and a witness to extraordinary kindness, smiled fully, letting the morning sun fill the apartment and her heart alike. She had been transformed. The storm had passed, and the world, just for tonight, had been undeniably, beautifully human.